Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining, whether it's the morning, evening, afternoon. If you're celebrating Diwali and you've taken time out to join us, extra appreciative. I'd love to hear in the comments, where you're joining from. I'd also love to know, if you want to throw in the comments the industry that you're interested in transitioning into. Maybe we'll be able to kind of come up with examples for you during the presentation best I can. But it's always nice to kind of know, where people are applying from and, what they're looking to achieve post-MBA. So I want you also, you can use the chat to ask questions throughout the presentation. Sometimes I'm really good at stopping and answering questions throughout the presentation. Other times I just get really into the content and we wait until the end. But it's up to you when you want to pose your question. We'll make sure to try to get to all of them in the time that we have today. So we're going to talk about my 7 top application tips. 2 that I think are most important are having clear, pragmatic goals and choosing your recommenders wisely. And we'll talk a little bit more about them today. But, as it relates to goals, I'll say that these should really make sense with your background. There should be kind of a clear transition of skill sets from what you do now to what you want to do. And you should know how the school that you're applying to is going to help you get there. Committees are often asking themselves, so his or her experience, plus the resources we know about at our school, does that equal success in this goal that they put forth? And then when it comes to recommenders, this is the opportunity for someone outside of yourself to confirm all of those things that you've said about your professional experience in your application. So we would advise that you ignore prestige. You don't want a CEO or C-suite executive writing a note unless they know you really well. So pick someone that knows you well and can write a good letter. You want them to be able to give specific examples and clearly compare you to your peer set. Recency is really important. So people that, you've worked with in the last year or so is ideal. And these should be people that you are comfortable having a conversation with ahead of time. So let's dig in more to both of those 2 tips, as well as the 5 other tips that I've prepared. Great, so let's see these comments. Okay, some folks from India, fantastic. Great, thanks for joining. So before we get started, I want to tell you a little bit about PersonalMBACoach if you haven't met us before. We were top ranked in Poets and Quants last year in the US. We presented at the annual GMAT conference with all of the admissions directors, and overall we have a 96% success rate. And last year our clients got in with $6.5 million in scholarships. We're a family operated business. We're run by Scott and his sister, and I'll introduce you to the team in a moment. And all of our clients receive one-on-one support from either Scott or another senior former admissions director on the team, like myself. We have clients to network with at all top schools, and we have a robust project management tool that our clients use to seamlessly move through the process with us. We often get the feedback that this is kind of the key to making sure that people stay on track, know their expectations, and find success in the process. I'd love to tell you a little bit more about our team. So we really are this boutique firm. We wear many hats. So you have Scott Edinburgh, our founder, went to MIT undergrad, where he studied business and economics at Sloan. He began his career after undergrad at Deloitte, and after Deloitte, he went to Wharton for his MBA and started PersonalMBACoach while he was there. I joined the team recently after spending 6 years on the admissions committee at Columbia Business School. While I was there, I was invited to, I need to share the PowerPoint. That would be really helpful. All right. So while I was there, I had the opportunity to travel across the globe, was invited to participate in many events and panels with colleagues from other M7 schools for organizations like the Forte Foundation and the MBA Tour. We also have MJ Shores, who is a former Wharton and UCLA admissions director, and Scott's sister Erin, who went to Yale for her MBA, worked at Bain, and is a former Forte scholar. Let's quickly talk about what we do, and then we'll get into the presentation. So let's say you're early on and you're not sure what you want to do. We have early planning packages for those who are planning to apply in a future year, but aren't quite ready yet. We help people think through how to perfect their stories between now and when they're ready to apply. Our comprehensive packages help clients throughout all aspects of the application process and include story development, essay planning and editing, and interview prep, among all types of other support. We also have GMAT, GRE, and executive assessment tutoring. So we have in-house software that guides you through tutoring sessions with modules, sample questions, thousands of answers, full-length exams, and we provide a pretty customized approach to tutoring. I won't go through all the details today, but our clients do really well in raising their scores, and we have a guaranteed happiness with all of our services, tutoring included. We have a team of former and M7 interviewers to help you prepare for your interviews, and like I said, client networks at all of the top schools. And we do all of this for MBA, as well as executive MBA, specialized masters, and other graduate programs. So let's dive into these 7 tips. Number 1, avoiding goals that are too ambitious. Having these practical, thoughtful goals. Most schools are going to explicitly ask you your short-term and your long-term goals. And if that's not necessarily in the essays or the application, it's going to be in the interview. And you're going to need to be able to defend these. So, you may have heard that admissions leaders, when they're in committee, they're looking to admit. They're not looking to reject people. They're really looking at your profile and saying, like, what about this profile is going to fit? How can we admit them into our class? And what they are doing is making sure that you're going to be successful. And so, like I said a little bit earlier, does your experience plus the school's resources, are those things going to get you to your goal? And if that's not the case, if you spent 3 years as a marketing coordinator for a food brand, and you're looking to come out of the MBA as a private equity associate in real estate, that is going to be an incredibly hard sell. So these goals need to be practical, and really the simpler, the better. So you don't necessarily want to say, I want to go to McKinsey and work on real estate program or real estate transactions post MBA. It might be that I want to go to a top strategy consulting firm and, kind of keep it at that. Typically post MBA consultants are generalists for at least a year before specializing anyway. And then like it says here, going back to your company as a short-term goal is a great option. It really demonstrates, I think first of all, it kind of allays any concerns about the admissions committee needing you to kind of have or land that job 2 years from now. So a lot of those job outcomes play into rankings. And so schools want to make sure that their class is going to have good outcomes 2 years down the line. And so by going back to your company, you kind of have this safety net. And if you're sponsored, even better. It demonstrates that this organization sees so much potential in you that they're able to make a really strong financial and time commitment to your studies. So what are some good goals? These are by no means a rule, just some examples that I've seen at the past at Columbia, that people have kind of given this kind of compelling and pragmatic connection to. So maybe you have a really strong background in engineering and you've started to take on more responsibilities and you want to make the transition into product management. Maybe you have work experience in an area of expertise, say real estate or marketing or healthcare, and you want to transition that into a consulting career to kind of really hone those like 360 skills of that consulting allows and broaden your experience across industries. It's also fine to want to go back to the same function, but in a more senior title, maybe at a company with a better reputation. So maybe you're in investment banking, but you're hoping to kind of go to a large bulge bracket bank post MBA, of course, with a more senior title than you started the MBA with. You know, all of those things make sense and are easy typically for a committee to kind of see you succeed in them, given what you've already accomplished. Some bad goals. So bad goals are goals that you aren't able to defend. A way to mitigate or a way to defend them is saying, well, I already have a pre-MBA internship lined up. So showing steps that you've already taken can kind of help to mitigate this. But like I said, you know, marketing coordinator to real estate private equity associate, that's going to be incredibly hard. In general, someone pivoting into something really competitive like private equity or venture capital without prior investing experience is going to be a very, very hard sell. Also picking a goal because you've heard it's like cool or popular is not a good choice either. So there are a lot of people who will pick consulting or product management without actually knowing what those skill sets are or what you have to do. I've talked to a lot of people who have said, oh, like I'm thinking about consulting because, you know, I have a lot of friends who really enjoy it. But what they don't understand is, you know, oftentimes they're on the road 4 days a week in small cities that are, you know, very different from the cities that they're leaving, and that the lifestyle is, you know, incredibly different than a lot of other jobs. And they don't necessarily kind of understand that. And it's clear from their essays and that they're just choosing this because other people have said that it's a cool job. And so again, being able to defend it, know why you're doing it. And, you know, if you don't know what impact you'll make in the role, and so we could go back to consulting again. You know, if you don't know what that impact is going to be, it's going to be hard to convince a committee or an interviewer that you understand this industry or function that you haven't had exposure to in the past. So number 2, think about your personal story and embrace your uniqueness. I think a lot of people panic when they hear the word unique and they think, I'm not unique. And that's by no means true. But I would say, you know, think about what you are bringing to the classroom. What unique set of skills or expertise can you bring to the conversations in the classroom? That is your uniqueness. Even if someone else has those same skill sets at your job, it's not you. They're not bringing it to the MBA program. So think about it maybe in that way. The best way to start developing your story is self-reflection. So think about what makes you unique, what drives the decisions that you make, and think about your passions. It doesn't need to be something that you're doing at work. It could be something you spend your time doing outside of work. For example, it could be a sport or some kind of volunteer activity. Think about how you are unique from your peers. Like I said, it may not be that you are the top performer on the consulting team or you're bringing in a big deal at a bank. It can be an impact that you're making in other ways. Also, the other thing is to think through the circumstances and choices that you have shaped or that have shaped you the most. And when thinking through the decisions that you've made, it helps to understand your values and your story. So, maybe you made the decision to go into healthcare. And so think about why did you do that? Oh, was it because, and we'll talk more about this in a minute, was it because of something that happened in your past and you want to help people? Well, that's a value, being driven to help people and then aligning that with your career goals. Once you've spent some time reflecting, try to identify some common themes in your personal and professional journeys. So we're going to walk through some examples. I just want to make sure, I want to take a peek at the comments. We have someone joining from Nigeria. Fantastic. Lagos. I recently learned that people in Lagos don't talk about the weather because it's always the same. I had been once, and so I assume it's always just kind of 80 degrees and rainy, but I thought that was a fun fact. So as you guys are joining, again, please feel free to share where you're coming from, the industry that you're interested in, and throughout the presentation, if you have questions, type them in the chat. We'll try to stop and take a look at them as we're going forward. So some past theme examples. Hobbies are maybe something that you do that drives many of your decisions. So for example, you'll see a picture of someone maybe being really involved in soccer. And so maybe growing up, soccer helped them overcome a challenge. Maybe they were shy, and this really kind of helped them to come out of their shell. And because of that, they still coach or they're aligned with a nonprofit. And now their goals touch on this some way, or, this experience drove them into a specific industry or has had an impact on the way they've been motivated to kind of pursue their career. And then there's a piano. So, maybe growing up, you competed professionally or, among your peers in piano. And so maybe you still play the piano, maybe you compete, maybe you teach music. And maybe while this doesn't necessarily have to do with your career right now, you still have this passion for it and you see yourself doing something with music moving forward, maybe, new methods and business approaches with music. So of course you'd have to be able to prove how you will get close to that space, given what you have done and how you're going to do that at school. But being able to tell that compelling story, proving that you understand the industry, that you have that industry context, and that you can paint the picture of how you're going to do it with the resources at that school is great. And it works for students or for applicants. Career aspirations. So maybe this is more personal, that, your career is a bigger part of you. So like we talked about before, maybe someone in your family had a medical issue. Maybe you saw someone, suffering from, let's say, Parkinson's disease, for example, and you saw a lack of care, a lack of resources, maybe where you were from, and you got involved in helping, and you have this interest in pursuing this professionally. So you're able to reflect on the skills that you have, understand the opportunities in the healthcare field, and then really discuss how you're going to leverage the MBA to make that transition. So travel. This is an interesting one. I've seen a lot of good essays about experience living in other countries, and I've seen some that really don't work well. And so, we're not talking about long family vacations. You might be able to leverage an internship into a story, but oftentimes these stories, these experiences in living in other countries, that impact is made when you're younger, usually before you go to undergrad, unless maybe you went to undergrad somewhere, really unique from your upbringing. But I've read a lot of essays while I was at Columbia about candidates describing themselves as third culture kids. So children who grew up in a culture different from the one in which, his or her parents grew up. And then also and they talk about how that has shaped them. And I think that a lot of these are really meaningful because they're able to talk about unique challenges that they've overcome as a result of the differences in culture of, what they're used to, what their parents expect. And like I said before, what can make this type of essay bad is kind of assuming that you're applying in a vacuum. And so, while I think it's incredibly impressive to say that you grew up in poverty and you were able to go to a top school and do really well and land this job, a lot of other candidates also have this same story. So what is it that is unique about your story? What is it that you've done differently or have had to overcome differently than your peers? And really be able to kind of highlight that, tell that story, how that plays into kind of your motivation, your values moving forward. And then there's personal loss, tragedy, or health concerns. So from all of my years in admissions, I've seen really great essays where people overcome incredibly challenging situations. So we talked about poverty, it might be loss or life-threatening illnesses, but sometimes these essays can come off as woe is me. So you have to make sure that this topic ties into overcoming the challenge and resulting in positive outcomes. And so while you are going to have to be vulnerable and describe like how it made you feel, it might have taken you to a dark place, it might have caused a lot of tension in your personal relationships. But what you want to make sure you do is you tease out some of the values that have like really come from that you now live by, or things like opportunities that you might have taken that you wouldn't have otherwise, and really talk about how that has pushed you into the success that you have found today, and how it will continue to push you into the success that you're going to find in and after an MBA. And then finally is volunteer and extracurricular work. So you want to ask yourself, has your volunteer and extracurricular experience impacted the decisions that you've made? Maybe your job is a little boring and you don't have many leadership opportunities, but you're a leader in a volunteer organization, or maybe you've started your own organization. You could emphasize this and talk about, the skills that you've used here, the impact that you were able to make to really demonstrate confidence that you will be both a leader in and beyond the MBA. But a kind of side tip here is that maybe you do have strong work experience and your extracurriculars don't have that leadership component, then maybe don't highlight this at the time. Great. So someone had mentioned tips for video essays. We will definitely get to that. That is tip number 7. So tip number 3, keep in mind that an average GMAT or GRE score is often not enough. I think this is really important. When I was at Columbia, I would often tell prospective students it's an average for a reason. That would mean very different things to different candidates. It might be words of encouragement from me to a less traditional applicant, letting them know that, plenty of applicants below the average have gotten in because of their varying experience. It also might have been a caution to an overrepresented group, that, when you are overrepresented in a pool of candidates, the best way to stand out are using things that you have control over, one of which, or somewhat control over, one of which is a test score. So really keep in mind that you're not applying in a vacuum. I oftentimes hear candidates say, well, I have a good GPA and I have good work experience. And so even though I'm overrepresented in some way, maybe I'm an Indian male or a white male from finance, or I come from a strong consulting background, at a top firm, that even though they have this strong work experience, this strong GPA, that they don't need, they're like right below the average, right at the average. They don't need to take the test again, because all of these other things will make the committee confident that they'll be successful. Yes, it's certainly true that those things will make the committee confident that you will be successful. But what you have to keep in mind is that, you get 6,000 to 10,000 applications a year. And so typically, I would guess about half of them would be successful at the school in which they're applying, but there are only so many seats. So yes, you would be successful there, but are the 6 other people applying at the same time as you equally as successful, but with higher test scores? Because in that case, you're not going to get that admission. And so really keep that in mind, use that as a motivating factor. And so if it wasn't clear before, people from overrepresented demographics or professional fields really should do better, typically, ideally 20 to 30 points better than the school's average. Those who have a lower GPA should try their best to have a higher test score, because it is holistic and schools are kind of looking at that full picture. So if that low GPA maybe indicates that you couldn't succeed in the classroom, giving them this standardized contemporary indication of your academic abilities via a GMAT, GRE, or executive assessment exam can help to kind of reinstate that confidence. So some people do have a lower GPA and a below average test score. And again, that shouldn't preclude you from applying. So when is this okay? So like I mentioned before, someone with a more traditional profile may get more slack on the test score because they bring value to the class in another way via their unique background and perspective. And not all schools value the test score in the same way. Like Harvard tends to have less of an emphasis on a test score. We've had clients with 700s on the GMAT get invites to HBS, but then another client with a 780 not. And schools like MIT and Berkeley are more focused on the quant score rather than your overall score. So really keep that in mind as you're thinking about your target schools. So here are some ways you can assess whether you've done everything you can to ensure you've reached your maximum test score potential as it So, did you consider all of the testing options? Did you take the GMAT and it's really not working out for you? Have you considered the GRE? Did you take the GMAT and your score is just not where you want it to be, but your IR score is really good? Well, the executive assessment, the overall score includes that IR score. And so if you're doing really well in the IR, and the schools that you're interested in take the executive assessment for full-time, for which there are many great schools that do, maybe you take the EA. And then, did you hire a tutor? Did you focus on areas of weakness? I'm a little biased. We have one-on-one tutoring, which allows our clients to work on their specific areas of weakness rather than signing up for like a large group tutoring session that may not have allowed you to spend as much time on your tough areas as possible. So really thinking about the tutoring or preparation approach you took and whether or not there is another option out there. Did you achieve your score with minimal studying? If there's room for improvement, if you could take more time and study, it can never hurt. There's not really a rule on how many times is too many times to take the well, you can take the GMAT like at least 4 times without any flags to the committee. They want to see that you've continued to try, and kind of this shows perseverance. It's not like a one and done. Being able to show incremental improvement really does demonstrate that you're committed to this process. So keep that in mind. You can take the GMAT and you could take the GRE, and you can just give them your GRE score, just give them your GMAT score. And so really think about how you can manipulate this aspect of your application to kind of demonstrate the best side of your test taking skills. So number 4, do not overload your extracurriculars without connecting them to a story. So we talked about this before. The story is really important. And so when you're picking the activities and initiatives that you want to take part in outside of your work, they should align with your personal values and your professional goals in some way. When you're selecting, you should really aim for leadership opportunities. So being able to maybe oversee and delegate and, manage others within the organization or initiative would be great. If you can't find new leadership opportunities, can you create your own? Is there a nonprofit that you can create? Is there an expertise that you have so that you could, create a new opportunity, bring your expertise to an underprivileged population and put something new out into the world. So that can be really compelling for committees, and it certainly shows leadership because you're kind of starting from scratch. And then, like we mentioned before, selecting your extracurriculars. So choosing activities that are easy to fit into your overall narrative. For example, like we talked about before, are you working in healthcare because of a personal or family health challenge? Could your extracurriculars also contribute to this cause? So if we went back to the Parkinson's example, is there a volunteer organization in which you might be able to take a leadership role, or some kind of nonprofit that you could start that would help contribute to, access to care or funding for research? There's also not a lot of value in having a ton of extracurriculars, even if they do tell a story. And, if they're all initiated right before applying, committees aren't going to be impressed by that. You'll want to work on not only thinking about leadership and impact, but also the length of the participation. So, if you're looking for a leadership role, but you are about to apply and you don't want to have that kind of visual of starting right away, dig back into some of those organizations that you're already participating in or that you've participated in the past. And maybe you can take a leadership role now, and it kind of shows this different timeline of engagement. So letters of recommendation. We could have a whole presentation on LORs. They are incredibly important, and they are a part of the application that you kind of don't have a ton of control over. You don't have a lot of control over the pool, like who your manager was, you can't change that, and you don't have really a lot of control over what they end up writing. So first, keep in mind that you don't need to ask, and you shouldn't ask, the highest person that you know in your company. You really want someone who knows you well and who is going to write a good letter. I often say if you have two people that know you really well, they're kind of apples to apples in terms of what they might be able to write about you. Think about the person who is like more bubbly, more enthusiastic, or has better writing skills. That's probably the person that you want to choose. It's, like I said, not worth it to get the head of your company to write a letter if it's not going to be specific. Ensure that they've worked with you for a while. So what does a while mean? Ideally 6 months or more. And recency is somewhat important here. So it should be someone that you've worked with in the last year or two, unless you've had a few positions since then. And those people in between aren't really set up to successfully kind of demonstrate your growth. Start thinking about what you want written in the letter. So what I mean by that is, say you have a low quant score on the GMAT and you want your recommender to talk about your analytical abilities in the letter, but maybe you don't do much that's analytical. Now is the time to take on some new work or ask for some new projects that allow for analysis, modeling, etc. Then make sure you have a conversation with your recommender so that you're on the same page as to what they should include in the letter, and emphasize that they should compare you to your peers. So for example, it can be really compelling to hear that you are the top 5% of analysts that your recommender has ever worked with. It kind of allows that context. It better understands kind of where you fall along with your peers, and helps the committee to compare you to other applicants. At PersonalMBACoach, we have clients fill out this letter of recommendation one-sheeter where we ask these questions to really tease out information that, we do a set of edits on that you can then share with your recommender so that they can easily write a strong letter. So making it easy as possible on them is kind of a key to this step. Let's talk about whether you ask for references from extracurriculars. If you have strong extracurriculars and if you've established yourself as a leader within the organization or group, this might be an option for you. Honestly, applicants rarely use this as an option, so don't worry too much if you don't have this. And some schools specifically say it needs to be a professional reference. So make sure you understand that before you're asking your recommenders. So 6, critically evaluating what you will learn during your MBA. I find when prepping clients during interview prep, the why an MBA question stumps them the most. This question comes somewhere between, what do you want to do and how do you want to do it at this school? But the why you want to do it in the first place is really important. So applicants really make the mistake of being vague about why an MBA, like learning business skills, expanding my business toolkit. Or worse, applicants say, well, I need an MBA so that I can get a job as a consultant post-MBA. An MBA it shouldn't be a stepping stone. It should be a key experience as part of your overall story. And you should know the specific skills that you need, those specific gaps, in order to be successful in your next role. So like I said, it's important to drill down the specific skills that you need that will complement the skills you already have that will make you successful in your next role. For example, maybe you want to go into product management and you have strong technical skills. You can code in multiple languages, but maybe you've never seen a P&L statement, or you don't have the marketing skills that's required to kind of be this mini CEO of a product. You'll want to talk about those specific skills. Great. So now you've identified some specific skills you need. The next step is proving that you're confident that an MBA is going to fulfill these. So you want to know how you'll gain these skill sets at the specific school in which you're applying. Maybe you want to be a product manager in the fintech space. Well, does the school have a fintech club? Does the fintech club have some kind of peer or alumni mentoring? Does that peer or the alumni come from one of your target companies? Being able to kind of paint that picture of how you see yourself gaining those skills at that school is just going to further, give either the committee or the interviewer confidence that you belong there. And so, like I said, no courses, no clubs, no specific club initiatives, know about experiential learning opportunities or global exposure in your target industry or function. And before we get into this, I know that the video essays were a question, but let's just peek to see if there are other questions. Let's talk about these questions at the end, just because I want to go through this and I don't think they're super relevant to everything that we've talked about so far, but definitely great questions. Okay, so video essays. Many schools are using video essays at some stage of the application process. So MIT, as part of their set of essays, requires a pre-recorded video. So you get to take the time, you get to practice, think about what you're going to say, and record it, knowing what you're submitting. Kellogg, Yale, and INSEAD require you to answer recorded questions live. So INSEAD and Yale, you don't know what questions you're going to get ahead of time. It's kind of like prepping for an interview, and you don't get to record it an unlimited a number of times. Kellogg, though, they give you the questions ahead of time, but again, it's not this opportunity to perfect your video. And then LBS and Booth require the video as part of the interview process. So a couple of tips. I would say don't over-rehearse. You shouldn't be reading off of a script. When you're prepping, and what we do with our clients is we ask them to put it in bullet points rather than write out a script. That will keep you from sounding too rehearsed, but will allow you to practice and kind of create this narrative that you're going to give. Maintaining eye contact with the camera is also really important. You do not want to, obviously I'm reading off of the slide right now, so it's like you can tell how distracting that is. But you don't ever want an interviewer to think that you're reading off notes as part of a video, especially something that you have time to prepare. But that's kind of cheating, and you don't want to do that. So make sure that it's better that you aren't super, super confident, and maybe you stumble a little bit and show that you're human rather than look on notes. And then varying your tone and showing expression. If you're talking about something that you're excited about, smile, talk maybe a little bit louder. You want to have kind of this intonation in your voice to keep the viewer engaged and to kind of show them how you're feeling about the topic that you're talking about. And then for questions that are these behavioral questions, make sure that you're using clear situation, action, and result. Typically, I tell my clients these responses shouldn't be over 2 minutes, but in this case, you're going to have a time limit. And if the time limit isn't set by a system that is cutting you off, just make sure you do not go over time. And then pay attention to lighting and background. So I would say that my lighting situation, I have a window in front of me. I would say this is pretty good lighting. I try to make sure that my background, if you can't put on a Zoom background that's like a blur or plain, that my background is plain, that my husband's not going to walk across behind me, that my door is shut so it is quiet. things like that. You guys are probably all really used to Zoom meetings by now, so use those skills. So we're going to get to questions in 1 second. So if you do have questions and you haven't submitted them in the comments, now is a good time. So last year, our clients at PersonalMBACoach got into not only the top programs, but they got a lot of scholarship dollars. So like I said, $5.5 million last year, much more scholarships than the average person applying to schools alone. And here are some of the sample of like the schools that our clients go to each year. So how can we help? For those of you who are joining late, I'm Nicole Shay, former admissions director at Columbia Business School. I was there for 6 years and a member of the PersonalMBACoach team. So we cover tutoring, brainstorming. So whether that's essays, or, ideas for essays, talking through essays, personal story development. So making sure we know how all of the aspects of your resume really connect and tell this compelling story. We do resume editing. The resume is pretty important, and we didn't talk about it today, but it's different than a professional resume. And so we can help convert it into an MBA resume. For essays, there's unlimited essay editing, guidance on content, line-by-line track changes. We also help, like I mentioned, with the letter of recommendation, who to ask, key points they should cover. And then we have mock interviews, like we mentioned before, with former interviewers from M7 schools. So really comprehensive. And if you want a sneak peek into our approach and strategy, a great place to start is by checking out our essay analysis ebook. I don't think you can click on the screen, but this is all on our website. It provides advice on how to specifically approach top schools' essays. If you're interested in learning more about how we can help or to schedule a free consultation, please send myself or Scott an email. Our email is here on the screen, or you can also register for a consultation via PersonalMBACoach.com. All right, so let's take some questions. Do you have any advice for anyone applying for a JD MBA program, knowing that the two programs, admissions offices, look at different aspects of the application as important? A great question. So I used to oversee our JD MBA admissions at Columbia. So worked closely with leadership at Columbia Law School to kind of make sure that we were marketing the program and providing information about it on the same page. And what I would say is, honestly, you should approach it. You should follow the instructions, first of all. So every school with JD MBA is different. Some will require you to submit a letter from a professor and a professional letter. And so just making sure that you're giving them the best version of what they're asking for. But my advice is to be honest about what you want to do. So if you want to go into big law, you should say that. And you should say that at both schools. There's a lot of caveats to this, and obviously this doesn't apply to everyone, but some schools it's one application, some schools it's two separate, but they talk about it. But if you want to go into big law, say that. Just make sure you tell the business school why you need the business skills to be successful in big law. If you want to go into big business, or maybe it doesn't have to be big business. Maybe you want to go into business. You need to make sure that you tell the law school why the law degree is imperative to make the greatest impact that you can in that industry and function. And so you're really not telling them different things. You're making sure that you're sticking with the same goal and that you're just really aligning with what the schools are looking for and telling them why you need that degree to be successful. So it's almost like talking about it in a vacuum. Like, this is what I want to do, whether it's law or business, and this is how the law school and this is how the business school are going to help me get there. So not super different than applying for an MBA. It's just kind of that second aspect of why law school. Does professional work experience play a crucial role even if the candidate has demonstrated the necessary skills strongly during school and college? Yes. So this goes back to like not applying in a vacuum. So work experience is crucial at top business schools. You're going to look at any school's average years of work experience, and the average is likely going to be around 5 years. People that say they wanted to do an MBA outside of college, you talk to them right out of college, you talk to them 3 years later, and they always say like, I'm so glad that I didn't. They got industry experience. They learned about what they liked, what they didn't like. And going back to the fact that you might have great experiences, but if every single other applicant has at least a year of work experience, then just by default, you're going to be the weakest person in the pool. Because everyone else that's applying is also going to have like strong school and college experiences. There are certainly MBA programs that will admit you without any work experience. They tend not to be these top MBA programs. So keep that in mind. Even if you have strong this, what do the other applicants have? And likely they have that same strong experience plus the work experience that you're missing. And I hope that wasn't too harsh. This is where we come in to try to be very straightforward with you. We don't want to play games. We want to make sure that we're setting you up for success and really thinking about, how you're going to be successful, not telling you exactly what you want to hear. Are internships working for companies on a contract basis, holding a position in the cultural society, and volunteer work count as an experience? Is the question whether these count as work experience? If the question is like whether internships or, holding these positions count as work experience really is thought of as the professional work you do full-time and are paid for after you graduate undergrad. All of the things that you do outside of your full-time job after undergrad, and the experiences that you had in your internships are considered as kind of your overall like skill sets that you've learned, experiences that you've had. But in terms of when they ask number of years or months of work experience, you don't count, your internships during undergrad. If it's an internship after undergrad and it was full-time and paid, you could count that kind of in that timeline. What is a good GMAT score goal for a non-tradition applicant applying for an M7? So it depends what you mean by non-traditional. If you have a really interesting background, maybe you're coming from, an NGO or theater or the arts or something, and you don't have that traditional quantitative background. However, you have these other really interesting, compelling experiences that will be a great addition to the classroom discussion, then, your GMAT might be okay to be a little bit below average. But if you are that person coming from a non-traditional background, but you're also from an overrepresented population, like, a white or Chinese or Indian male, then you kind of have to think that it's pulling you one way. You need a higher score. You don't necessarily need this high score. And, maybe the average is going to be okay for you. So I hope that made sense. You kind of have to consider all of the aspects of your candidacy and decide kind of how that might move the needle on the score that's going to be accepted by the committee. How can we choose which school to go to? For context, my background is in marketing and I intend to continue with it, but at a company that gives me better professional opportunities. Yeah, so this is a great question. Only you can choose the school that you want to go to. Certainly you could work with PersonalMBACoach. We help to decide what is a good target school, reach school, and safety school, given your overall profile. But if you're interested in marketing, like most people are going to say Kellogg. Like Kellogg is known for their marketing program. And so I wouldn't say, okay, then you should go apply to Kellogg. I would say, now you should start learning more about Kellogg. And really understanding what schools do what you want to do really well. So what schools do them best, and then work backwards from there. If you go to a Columbia, you go to a Harvard, you go to a Booth, even though they aren't, the first word that comes to mind isn't marketing, all of the M7 schools and even beyond are going to have really strong marketing resources. And so it's really about getting to know the school, getting to know their marketing resources, getting to know their networks in that area, starting to paint that picture, the idea of like, oh, I can see myself achieving that at this school. Who are the recruiters? What companies are these schools recruiting into? Are those your target companies? Oftentimes there's career reports where you can see all the companies the students recruited to in past years. So take a look at those. That's going to help you write your essays. It's going to help you defend your goal and why that school in your interviews. So do that research, knowing that all of these schools are probably going to help you with that thing. And then what you have to decide is the cultural fit. So it's not just about going to a classroom and learning these marketing skills. It's about contributing and, recruiting and all of these things. So what are the other aspects? What cultural aspects of the community really align with your values, what you like to do outside of the classroom, what you do for fun, what you do for volunteering? Are there opportunities to be yourself in those dimensions at that school? And so that's really important too. So it does take a little work on the back end. Luckily, not that COVID was a good thing whatsoever, but if you're really trying to tease out silver linings of this awful pandemic, is that so much of this content, so many of these events are virtual. And so it gives you the opportunity, no matter where you are in the world, to kind of have the same exposure to the information that is out there for prospective students. What is the suitable goal options for entrepreneur background folks? Many said entrepreneur work experience will not be a suitable fit for employability. So, it depends. It's really, I wouldn't say that entrepreneurial experience is not suitable for employability. And I hope that we're talking about, if you're an entrepreneur and you want an MBA, what should your goal be? That's how I'm reading this. What industry and what function were you playing in the entrepreneurial space? Did you start your own company? How did you quantify success? What were the challenges that you faced? And oftentimes, if you're going from entrepreneurship and you're trying to make a pivot into an established organization, you're going to want to pick a goal that closely aligns with the experience that you had. That way, you don't have to do too much proving of like being able to switch from, working on this fintech startup to being a brand manager at a CPG company. It's going to be hard to connect those dots. But, if you are, trying to start your own fintech and you had this app and maybe it didn't work out, maybe you want to do product management post MBA. Also keep in mind that what you say your goal is and what you actually pursue at the school do not have to be the same. So no school is going to follow you around with your application and say, no, you can't recruit for that job because you said you wanted to do this industry. And so keeping in mind that there's a lot of flexibility once you get there, the committee just wants to see that you have a plan in place while you're, preparing to start the MBA. How crucial is it to have a title, bump, promotion on your resume? My background's a little unique. I went from an analyst to an assistant at an LA-based talent agency to pursue becoming an agent. So first, so even if you don't have a title bump. So there are certain industries where people just like don't move up every 2 years. Like asset management, for example. I remember a lot of asset managers expressing to me when I was at Columbia, like, you're not going to see any promotions on my resume, but I've worked here for 4 years and it's not because I haven't been doing better. And we say, no, don't worry. We're going to look at your salary. Your salary is going to have increased. And we understand that this is like a natural thing that happens with this industry. If maybe you took a role and then you took a step back and maybe your salary dropped and your title changed to something that is, could suggest that it's less senior. You can also address this in like an optional essay, or even like depending on what application gives you what type of space, is to just say like, oftentimes they'll ask you why you left your last job. And it's like, well, I wanted to make the transition into becoming an agent. And so just making sure that you take an opportunity to talk about why you made that step. And then again, really being compelling about the skill sets that you've gained from these experiences. So there's always going to be an opportunity to address it. But if you went from an analyst to an assistant, but you have a bump up in salary, then oftentimes it doesn't need explaining, because even though they're different words, they are obviously have different levels of responsibility, or at least, they necessitate a higher salary. Would MBA from Wharton or INSEAD help in career progression to a C-suite level role in the tech industry? I have 12 and a half years of work experience in IT, managing projects in 4 continents. I oversaw recruitment strategy for our executive MBA program at Columbia for years. And I think, the MBA programs are incredibly helpful. You have a really strong network. It depends what you mean as a C-suite level role. Is, an MBA from Wharton, given your work experience, going to get you to the C-suite at Amazon over the next 4 years? No. But if you're looking for maybe a chief technology officer at a smaller company over a certain amount of time, like, these programs really help with leadership, and they help you to network, and you learn from your peers, and you're also getting that same foundational business knowledge. So, that's why people do spend so much time investing. That's why it's so important that these programs are in person and they require so much of your time, is that they are essentially MBAs, but on a different schedule. And so, I certainly think that at these top schools, the return on investment exists. Get to know the schools better. A lot of these EMBA programs will have resume review opportunities. So, take a look at their websites. We also do executive MBA consulting. We do lots of it. And so if you're looking for help on your MBA applications, please reach out to us. We can talk about how we can help. And then how does the MIT Sloan full-time fellowship program and the Stanford MSX compare to Wharton MBA for a person from an IT background? Well, Wharton, you have to be employed full-time, and it's over a couple of years, whereas MIT Sloan Fellows and Stanford are both full-time 1-year programs. And so in that sense, they're very different in your experience, what you would be expected to do. I think being at Stanford is a really great place if you're looking for kind of that technology leadership. But I don't think, and same with MIT, but Wharton is arguably one of the best EMBA programs out there. And you're going to have, given its size, a ton of technology leadership there. So it's really about getting to know those 3 schools, understanding like what your peers are like MIT, that, those programs sometimes have higher years of work experience. Just get to know the schools. And, if you were to work with us, we can also kind of help guide you in terms of which are the best. Do career switches, oh, I know we're going a little over time. So let's just finish out these 2 questions. And then if you have other questions, you can always reach out to us. Do career switches affect profiles? I'm passionate about my job and have had solid growth, but it has nothing to do with my undergrad. Oh, no, no. I mean, if you studied mechanical engineering in undergrad and you then became like a consultant at McKinsey, that's perfectly fine. Like that doesn't matter. Oftentimes in an interview, someone will ask you to walk them through your resume and you'll say like, oh, I went to Berkeley and studied mechanical engineering. While I was there, I realized that I actually liked having a higher level. I liked kind of having that higher level impact on a project. And so I pursued consulting. That's where I landed. I did an internship at McKinsey and landed my first job there, et cetera. And so that transition doesn't matter. People often don't do what they studied in undergrad. In short-term career goal of entrepreneur background candidate, which is suitable, returning to prior startup or venture or working in a relevant company and then returning to prior startup. Returning to the prior startup or venture is a great goal because, you can be confident that you'll have a job when you graduate. Working in a relevant company and then returning, it's also fine as long as the relevant company is actually relevant and you're able to kind of tie those things together. Again, you could say that you want to go back to your startup, but while you're there, you also pursue this parallel path of recruiting for a relevant company. And in that case, you're putting together a good application, but also having the opportunity to take a path that you've also been considering. Great. Well, thank you guys so much for your time. I really appreciate it and appreciate sticking in there 8 minutes over schedule. Like I said, my email's here, Scott's email's here. You can also schedule a consultation through our website. So please feel free to reach out. We'll get on the phone with you, talk about our services and how we could help you. We have, I would say, we have clients from all over the world. And we have clients from Nigeria, we have clients from India, from China, from South America, certainly from North America. So, we have really great success kind of across all different backgrounds and industries. So keep in touch with us. We'd love to work with you. And I hope everyone enjoys the weekend ahead.